Good morning. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm one of the portfolio coordinators at the Charter School Authorizing and Administration Division at TEA. My teammates are Bruce Marchand, Laurie McIntyre, and Rita Gazal. And what we do is are responsible for supporting charter schools throughout their life. When a charter school is up for renewal, we help the process and oversee the process of that. When schools seek to amend their charter, we're the people that schools contact. If the schools just kind of want general advice on how to address an issue, we are the people that y'all will contact. And we also oversee the governance reporting process, which is the hat that I'm wearing today. And let me say from the outset that I do talk kind of quickly. And if you have any questions that I don't cover here, or that I did cover, but I talked so quickly that you missed it, you can always get back in touch with me or anyone else on the charter school portfolio team. That contact information will be at the end of the presentation today. So the governance submission window is open now from October 1st to December 1st, and that is set forth in rule as to when that is in the Texas Administrative Code, or the TAC, you'll hear me refer to it as. This is submitted electronically to us and through an application that we use called the Charter School Tracking System, or CSTS, and that can be accessed by you with regard to your individual school through TEAL, which stands for the TEA login. And so I'm talking about some pretty basic things here that are old hands that know already, but I know that there are other people that are viewing this that have not done this process before. So I want to be as clear as possible. As clear as possible in how this process is going to work. One thing that I'll also point out, just because it occurs to me now and I don't want to forget to say it later, many schools' board of governors changes during the year at a time other than October 1st through December 1st. And we want to know that information as well. I will give you an email box, or I'll tell you an email box to which you will email such changes throughout the year. It's not a secret, it's chartergovernance@tea.texas.gov, but you'll see that in writing a little bit later in this presentation. And speaking of seeing that in writing, this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website for you to view as many times as you want. This slide deck from which I'm working will also be on our website, and you'll be able to access it. Before you start actually submitting governance forms, there will be a form for every individual at your school that is a board member or an officer. And I will go into more detail on which officers need to submit. But before you do any of that, the actual going on to CSTS and submitting information, there are some details that you should take care of before that. You can refer to a document that we put on our webpage called the 2020-2021 governance. I'm sorry, it'll be the 2021-2022 governance guidelines and instructions. Okay, I take it back. I'll have to look at that. But that will be available on our website that you can download and get some information on how to submit governance. And you will need to collect evidence of training for your officers and board members. Training is detailed in Rule 19 TAC 100.1102 is where it starts. But there are a number of rules that pertain to training depending upon what role we're talking about. And that citation will also be later in this presentation. So if you weren't able to write it down, don't worry about it, you'll see it again. You will collect current fingerprinting and criminal record checks, making sure that you are compliant with all of that, and prepare an on-site records filing system. One of the things that we do when we visit schools is we ask to look at how your governance forms are being kept. In addition to submitting these electronically to TEA, you are also required to print them out and sign the paper copies with actual signatures, and those need to be kept on site. So we want to make sure that those are being kept in a reasonable way. You'll want to make sure that your files are safe and secure for when when you're asked to produce them. You'll also want to make sure that your board information agrees with what is on the Secretary of State's website. If it is not, you either need to square that with Secretary of State or with TEA because those need to be identical. Finally, once you've done all these things, what you also need to do is create an account online for yourself through Teal and within CSTS. If you don't have a Teal account yet, you can get there a couple ways. I put the URL, the web address here on the slide. It's just hyperlinked. Or you can also go to TEA's website, and in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there will be a hyperlink for Teal. You'll click on that. And if you don't have an account yet, you don't have a sign-in privilege yet, it will give you instructions on how to get it. Once you are in Teal, the application that you want is CSTS, a charter school tracking system, and superintendents need to get for themselves what's called the charter approver role. The charter approver is the one who, at the end of the process, will actually click the button that says submit to send all of the governance information to the TEA. Now, there are some schools that are very large, and the superintendent doesn't have the bandwidth to collect information from every officer, from every board member. They will have an individual or a number of individuals that will be charged with doing that. So one of the things that a lot of schools do is select a person who will be sort of their governance point person that will collect the necessary information. And in fact, for that person, you have the option within CSTS of creating a data entry role. And that person will be able to access whatever information, they'll be able to access CSTS and input all this information for the governance submission. And the superintendent doesn't have to step in until the very end when they review the information and click the button that says submit to send it all to the TEA. And the superintendent is the only one who can do that. I think I've said it before, but I want to emphasize again that reforms are required to be submitted by December 1st, 2021. And that December 1st date is in rule that we have to follow. And you'll want to submit it by the deadline because if you don't, this will affect your Charter School Performance Framework or CSPF score. It may affect your ability to get amendments to your charter down the road if you have missed a deadline like this. So when schools, we've seen, when schools have missed this deadline, there's a handful. It's oftentimes because it's fallen through the cracks. I mean, they fully intend to do the governance submission, but for whatever reason, they're not, they forget or something like that. So what I and the rest of the portfolio coordination team will be doing is sending out reminders to you throughout this 2-month window, maybe every week, maybe twice a week, even towards the end, just to remind you that this needs to get done. So what I'm going to spend most of our time doing today is to walk through each screen that you will see in the charter, or rather in the governance process, and tell you just what you can expect. I'll say again, you'll see that like the first thing we ask for is the person's name. It's because we need to have a form for every single individual. And so the person will put on, or the data entry person will enter a board members or officers' first name, middle initial, and last name. And for that person, we need 2 phone numbers. The first phone number can be their work phone number, the number of the school, but the second number needs to be an alternate number at which we can reach them. This could be a home number or a cell phone number, and it needs to be unique to that person. At the end, when the superintendent submits all of these, one of the things the system does is checks to make sure that no two people have the same alternate phone number. The point is here, and the reason for this is we want to be able to contact everybody. If the information is not unique to that individual, we may not be able to. So we want to have this detailed information. The person submitting, I'm looking at the third bullet point now, must submit their email address, and that can be the school's email address or their address at the school. We need two physical addresses. The first can be the mailing address of the school, but the second needs to be that person's primary residence address. And as with the alternate phone number, it needs to be unique to that individual that is submitting this particular form. Finally, look at the last bullet point. The Public Information Act is a law in Texas that enables officials at public institutions like we are to withhold their contact information to the general public. If you opt to do that, you'll be able to click a little box, which I'll show you now. Lower left-hand corner, you can see a little box there. If you choose not to allow public access to the information on this screen, you can select that box and move on. Now, we try to streamline the submission of these forms every year, make them more efficient. One of the areas of efficiency I want to point out to you on this slide, in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a button that says Next. We'll take you to the next screen. There used to be two buttons there. One was a Save button, and the other was the Next button. And you would have to save the screen before clicking Next. And we just combined them into one button. So you click Next and advance to the next screen. And what you'll get to is the roles of people. And the individual will be either a board member or an officer. And what they will enter for that role is a little bit different. So I'm going to address each in turn. The board member will most likely click the box at the very top of the screen. It's a little bit confusing, but we have check boxes there for primary and secondary boards. There are some schools that are structured in such a way that you have a charter holder that does a number of things, including running a school. And that charter holder has the primary board for the charter holder overall. And then the individual school or particular school might have its own board, and that board we would call the secondary board. Both people, both the primary board members, the secondary board members, all have to submit a governance form, but on this screen will give you the submitter the opportunity to indicate which board they're on. And like I said, I know it's confusing because really most schools don't have more than one board. And if your school has just one board, you don't have to get bogged down in whether it's a primary or secondary board. Just click the box at the top for primary board, and that's your role. Then if you look at the very bottom, so the specific powers and duties the governing body, the charter holder or charter school has delegated to the individual as described by the powers and duties listed in the charter. That's a narrative section where the board member submitting the form will just say what it is they do for the school. Oh, and I kind of skipped over the box in the middle of the screen where the board member will indicate what role they have on the board, whether it's a board president or vice president or what have you. We also want to know information about officers at the school. And there's another drop-down menu there for people to select what role they have as an officer. They might be a superintendent or chief executive officer. And let me pause there and point out that / between superintendent and chief executive officer means or. We contemplate that there would not be a superintendent and a chief executive officer at one school. There are a few schools that do have both roles, and we don't encourage that, but the charter might call for it. And so what you would need to do if you're in such a school is tell us at TEA where in your charter it says that these two roles must exist, and make sure that that's reflected in the organizational chart for your institution. And so we expect, though, that in almost every case, there's either going to be a superintendent or a chief executive officer. You may have a chief operating officer at your school, and that person may be the assistant superintendent, maybe something else, some other title. And so on the drop-down menu, you'll see other COO. You might have a business manager or chief financial officer, a principal or assistant principal. All that's to say that, in other words, that we expect governance forms submitted by everybody down to the assistant principal level. Finally, we want to hear from any other central office personnel that have administrative leadership responsibilities that we haven't thought of on the drop-down menu, or that can't be found in so many words on the drop-down menu. As far as whether a given central office person needs to submit governance, you can refer to another rule that gives further details on this, which is 19 TAC 100.1001, which is the big definitions rule that we have. And you can look up central office personnel, that'll give you details on who that person would be, or who is the kind of person that has administrative leadership responsibilities. And if that rule doesn't explain or doesn't help you with whether a person needs to submit a governance form or not, you can always contact me or someone else on the portfolio coordination team just to ask, here are the details with regard to this person. Does that person need to submit a governance form? This is the screen that you'll be looking at when you fill out information for the officer role. There's another box that you're going to fill in if the person is a principal or an assistant principal. Your box on the right-hand side it shows as blank here, that'll actually be populated with all of the CDCNs for your school, CDCN's campus, or rather county district campus number. And so the principal or assistant principal submitting the form will select which CDCN applies to them, which school, which campus rather, that they're at. And finally, at the bottom of the screen, you can see there's a narrative box where the person that is submitting the form will describe what they actually do for the organization. A reminder that the titles and responsibilities of the governance form they're submitting here need to agree with the titles and responsibilities of the positions on your org chart in your bylaws. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world. What you would need to do is submit to us a non-expansion amendment to request that you can change your charter so that your bylaws are changed to what is reflected in the governance forms that you submitted. The next section is compensation. Now, if the person submitting is a board member, we expect the salary for that board member to be zero. It's stated in statute that it's expected that board members are not paid. However, there are exceptions to this particular rule, which I'll get to in a little bit. But if you are disclosing salary, the total compensation needs to be everything that is earned or is going to be earned during the 2021-2022 school year from anyone affiliated with a charter holder or the charter school, or for anyone affiliated with a charter holder or charter school. And if the charter holder operates multiple charters, we need to know on a given form how much that employee's salary is, even if they work for multiple charters. For instance, let's say that I am a superintendent of two different schools, the Jeffrey Cook ABC Academy and Jeffrey Cook XYZ Academy. I need to submit a governance form for each of those schools. I need to submit a governance form for each of those schools. And on each form, I'm going to put my total compensation that I earn for everything I do with regard to my superintendent role. I've gotten the question in the past, well, what if there are two different charters? Can I split my total income between those two charters that I oversee? And the answer is no. You would submit your entire amount on each of those forms. And you don't have to worry, we're not going to combine those two and think that you make more than you do. We know that on each form, you're giving us your total compensation. So salary and bonuses is the first blank that you'll fill out, and everybody that earns that is an employee of a school will fill that out. But we have a number of other boxes for schools or for individuals submitting forms to declare some kind of compensation they're receiving from the school. They may receive valuable benefits, and they would want to write down the value of those benefits on the form. They might receive compensation for goods or services under contract with the school, or reimbursement for personal expenses. They're going to write those too. Not everybody will, but we want to give schools the opportunity to tell us whatever additional compensation they got from their work at the school. And so we tried to think of all the different possible means of compensation a person might get. Here is the actual screen that you will see for this part. And you can see that on mine, this is Cook Jeffrey's form. Salary and bonuses is filled out, and I didn't get any other compensation from the school, so all those other blanks are just going to be 0. And I can click next and then move on from that screen. The next section, for these forms is the compliance section. And here there are a number of questions we're going to ask, because there are a number of statutes on the books that lay down requirements for charter schools. And so what we did was we took those different statutes and we gathered them all up in one place on this governance form, just to make sure that you're compliant with those different statutes that are applicable to you. One of them regards nepotism. And in general, Texas frowns upon people in schools with nepotistic relationships with one another. That is, they're related to other people by consanguinity or affinity. Consanguinity means related by blood. Affinity means related through marriage. And in general, relatives within the third degree of consanguinity or affinity cannot be employed or on the governing board of the same school. So for instance, if my brother serves on the same school board as I do, and I want to know, is he prohibited from being on the same board as me? The way that you do it is you count from yourself to the common ancestor that you share with the person in question, and that is one step. And then you count down from that common ancestor to the individual that you're concerned about. So with me and my brother, if I count from myself to my mother and father, it's the common ancestor, that's one step. And then count down from that common ancestor down to my brother, that's the second step. So my brother is related to me within the second degree of consanguinity. Therefore, he could not serve on the same board as me. However, there are certain exceptions in statute and rule to this anti-nepotism standard. And for instance, if a school has been around since before 2013, and they have a relative working at the school that has been continuously employed there since before 2013, when this nepotism rule went into effect for charter schools, well, then they would have that exception and can continue to employ that person. But with regard to every person within the third degree of consanguinity, we need some more details. So we can also make that determination at the TEA, including the name of the relative, the submitter's, the form submitter's relationship with that relative, and the position held by the relative's hire date, who hired that person, and the current supervisor of that person, and that relative's annual compensation. It's going to look like this. So if you had answered no to the nepotism question, you'll just move on. If you answered yes, you'll fill out this row of boxes that you'll see on the form with those criteria that I was just talking about. If you have more than one relative that is within that third degree of consanguinity or affinity, you'll click the Add Relative button, and it will generate another row of boxes that you can fill out, as many as you need, to identify all the relatives that would be in question. With the compliance section also, we'll ask you if you're a registered voter. You need to be a registered voter somewhere in the United States, and so you'll indicate what state you're a registered voter in. Most of the time it's Texas. And you will indicate whether you have been convicted of a criminal offense, some offense that disqualifies you from serving in whatever role you're in at a charter school. And that is also defined in statute, and it's defined in statute on the form. I think the citation is there, so you can see if the criminal offense of which you can have been convicted disqualifies you. You will also attest, answering yes or no to the question of whether you have expanded without prior approval of the Commissioner of Education. As you know, schools cannot just open a campus wherever they want to at any time. What they have to do is formally submit a request for an expansion amendment to the Texas Education Agency, specifically the people on my team, the portfolio coordinators. And then we make a recommendation to the commissioner. The commissioner gives permission or approval for whether that campus can open. Here you're making the attestation that you have not opened some campus without the prior approval of the commissioner. You will indicate whether you are, I just want to make sure I haven't skipped anything, whether you're current with training requirements. As I mentioned before, the training requirements for charter school personnel are lined out starting at 19 TAC 100.1102. If you are current with training, you'll just answer yes and move on. You are required, according to those charter school rules, to complete the necessary training for whatever role you're in within 1 year of your starting at a school. And we don't expect for you to have completed a full year's worth of training before that first year or before that year is up. So if you have selected no, maybe it's because you just didn't do it. And that's the first bullet point here. But you may be an official at a brand new charter school that hasn't been in existence for a full year yet. So you'll indicate, no, I don't have my training yet, but I know that I have to complete my required training within 1 year. Similarly, if you are at an existing charter school, but you're a new official at that school and you haven't been there for a full year yet, it's not expected that you would have completed your training by the time governance is submitted. So you'll indicate on this form that you are a new official and you know you have 1 calendar year to complete the training. One thing that is missing from this part of the form is an additional exception to if someone answers no. Last year, they had the opportunity to say, no, I didn't complete training, but it's because COVID considerations kept me from getting my training. And we took that off this year. So it's no longer a reason for not completing training. Here is the actual sample screen that you'll see. Also in the compliance section, I mentioned before that there's a number of statutes out there that require charter schools to do one thing or another. And those have been collected here, the ones that require schools to have posted a certain thing on their website. One thing that schools are required to do is post the members of their governing body. We want the exact web address where that may be. The statute enables or allows schools to post the names of their charter school board on their homepage. So the exact web address for that first bullet point would look something like www.jeffreycookxyzacademy.org, and that would be it. And by the way, before I leave that, the statute only requires that the names of the charter school board are listed. Many schools will also put some contact information for individual board members, put biographical information, but the statute only requires the names. Contact information and biographical information are great, and they are consistent with our goal of making charter schools as transparent to the public as possible. But like I said, they're not required by statute. We require a little bit more detail on website postings in the second and third bullet points. Charter schools must provide the exact web address where the superintendent's salary is posted. There is a statute that requires the superintendent's salary to be posted. Schools may not just link to the TA's big long list of superintendent salaries. They actually have to indicate the salary for the superintendent of their school. And this is typically not on the homepage. It's a few clicks in to a school's website. And so what we want to know is the exact address of the page where that information can be found. And so we're talking about a web address that looks like www.jeffreycookxyzcharteracademy/superintendent salary, or something like that, so we can go right to where that superintendent's salary is located. You also are required by statute to provide financial statements of the charter school. And these must be continually posted. In other words, the financial statements are the school's AFR. And that needs to be posted whenever someone comes to a school's website and wants to look at the financials for that school. And so you can't just post them and leave them up for a week or two or a month, and then take them down after a certain time. They must be continuously posted. Finally, the fourth bullet point says optional. There's a statute that is applicable. This came online a few years ago. It is applicable only to ISDs, but it requires that schools post on their website a student code of conduct and a notice for the public setting forth the circumstances under which a person may be refused entry to or ejected from the school district's property. We included it here, even though it's not required of you, charter schools, because it's just good practice. And to have these items fully organized or fully created within your school and posted for the public to see, because again, we like the public to have as much access to what that charter school is doing as possible in order to make the best possible choice between different available schools to them. Another reason that it's there is because it wouldn't be surprising if this became applicable to charter schools in the near future. And it is just a good idea for everybody to do, regardless of whether it's required. Here is a copy of the page that you'll see in the actual CSTS system. Finally, each governing board and school officer is going to submit their own form, as I said, And at the end of this process, after the forms are all, the information is all collected, but before submission, you will print these forms out and distribute them to the people to which they apply, and then get that person's signature. That signed document must come back to you at the school and stored in one place on site. The superintendent must further sign and certify a few things. What I was mentioning before about board personnel changes, the superintendent is going to send in to the charter governance at ta.texas.gov email box any charter board personnel changes that happen outside the October through December window. Many charter schools will change their board or personnel on their board in January, at the beginning of the calendar year. And so those would need to be reported to TEA through that email box. The superintendent is going to certify that all submitters have followed the law, that the governance documents are going to be kept on site, and that all the criminal background checks, training materials will be producible upon request by the TEA. And then the charter approver, the superintendent, will click a little button that says submit. And when that happens, a pop-up box will come up with a list of assurances that they're making. And at the bottom, there's I agree or I do not agree. The superintendent will click I agree. And it will take a few moments, maybe even several seconds, depending upon the size of the school, the number of governance documents submitted, for them all to get uploaded. And one thing I want to caution you about is don't close the application, click off of this screen until you receive an indication from TEA that your documents, have been received and you're done. There was one year when a charter school was convinced that they had submitted their governance forms, but we had not received them. We determined that what happened was the superintendent did click I agree on the assurances page, but closed the application before receiving indication that the documents have been received. So the charter school thought that they had submitted when they really hadn't. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation, what I wanted to tell you about in the walkthrough of the governance reporting forms this morning. I put here the contact information for me and Dr. Bruce Marchand, who is the leader of our team, and Lori McIntyre and Rita Gazal. Any of these people can be contacted with governance information. As many of you know, we have I and Lori and Rita have divided up the charter portfolio within the state of Texas according to alphabet. For instance, I am involved with charter schools whose names start with A through D. And so if you fall within that part of the alphabet, I would be your contact person if you have any governance questions. But I'll say this, it's not, we're not being draconian about it. If you email me, which is fine, and really you are in Lori's part of the portfolio or Rita's part of the portfolio, that's fine. Either I'll answer your question or I'll forward your question to Lori. But either way, your question will be answered just as soon as we possibly can, because I know that the governance window is pretty short. Okay, and that is the end of the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, if I've gone over something too quickly, please don't hesitate to follow up and let me or someone else on the team know. And with that, I thank you very much for coming this morning and to learn a little bit more about the governance reporting process. And I wish you luck for the remainder of the school year if I don't talk to you again. Thank you very much.